Welcome. Great to have you here. This is a unique moment, a moment that unites all of us. We all face anxiety and loss. We all see broken systems. We all experience the impact of the climate crisis. This is a unique moment. This is a turning point if we choose to make it one. This is a moment to reflect, to learn, to share, and to co-create. And I invite you to contribute. I ask you to contribute. I ask you to partner to fix broken systems. I ask you to join the movement so everyone can step into their change-making power. I ask you to nominate the next generation of changemakers. And I ask you to share your wisdom, your knowledge, your expertise. And I ask you to donate to support changemakers. This is our moment to fix the world. This is our moment to contribute. Today is the day, and you are the one.
Welcome to all of you, and thanks very much for joining our conversation today with three impactful social entrepreneurs, Jenny, Pablo, and Brett, who are helping us to discover certainty by narrowing the participation gap and enabling communities to exercise their agency, in large part through the strategic use of technology. I'm Todd, and I'll moderate our discussion today. I'm based in Ashoka's London office and spend most of my time championing candidates for the fellowship through our selection process. I'm joined by two wonderful colleagues from Ashoka's Buenos Aires office, Nico, who is ensuring that our session runs smoothly behind the scenes, and Lucia, who will assist with translation to and from Spanish. Nico and Lucia, thank you. And just a reminder to everyone joining in, we're keeping our eyes on the chat and swap card to ensure that your questions for the panelists are addressed. Thank you for your participation. Our Ashoka Germany colleague, Matthias Scheffelmeier, has said that the goal of social entrepreneurship is to ensure that everyone has power. And our three panelists today bear that claim out. Jenny, Pablo, and Brett empower others to live their lives more fully and independently, and to engage in change-making of their own. These three social entrepreneurs crystallize Ashoka's vision for an everyone a changemaker world. And to get us started, each of our panelists will share a bit about themselves and provide an overview of their new solution to the participation gap. We start with Jenny Lindstrom Bejar from Gothenburg. She's the founder of Our Normal, which connects, enables, and celebrates families with children with intellectual disabilities. Jenny, welcome.
Thank you, Todd. So I will share a few slides with you. Let's see. Yeah, so I am Jenny from Sweden, and I am the founder of the digital platform Our Normal, connecting families of children with disabilities and special abilities. At our platform, each family can post their own family presentation and then easily connect with each other. So this is a picture of my family. I have two daughters, and my oldest daughter, she was born with Down syndrome. So that's why I do what I do today. There might be different reasons for reaching out and wanting to connect with others. We enable this with this platform. It can be to find others with same interests or the same experiences of similar diagnosis, for example. Just short, what we do is that we are not organized specifically focusing on one diagnosis or type of disability, but rather we focus on youth and kids and families. So we work across diagnosis. That's part of our model to support families, basically, because we have a vision that's simple and short. It's no isolation, nowhere. And just some short facts about our organization and the work we do. We are a non-profit organization. As I said, we work across diagnoses. So we have more than 60 diagnoses in the network today. Important to us is the person first. No one is their diagnosis, but the diagnosis is something you have. And it's also important part of who you are. Sometimes we work digitally first. This is also important for our model and why we started this initiative. We saw a lack of modern tools reaching out to families out there. And we have launched primarily in Sweden, but we are ready to scale this model. So I hope that's part of our vision for the future. And we also work a lot with communication. Here are some of the communications in Swedish, of course. But we work from within to build strength, pride, and joy. I think it's really important to create change. It must also come from within the community. So here is just a little glimpse of the communication we do. And we also have a mission to enrich the lives for families and children with disabilities and special abilities through wider social family networks, but also to more possibilities to live their lives just like anyone else. One way we do this is that we have quite recently also launched one part of our digital platform, which is an expo, where we, through our knowledge and the network with our families, support sites, museums, amusement parks, and so on, in their work in becoming more inclusive. And this is an area for them to show their work digitally. And we have recently started to work and go more deep into this around the concept of universal design, where our families can be part of a panel to support specific sites or so in their development processes. So that's short about the work we do and who I am. So I just want to say welcome to Connect to everyone.
Thanks very much, Jenny. And we'll be coming back to you for some more conversation. But now on to Pablo. We welcome Pablo Le Cuono from Buenos Aires. He is the founder of Tiflonexos, which empowers the visually impaired by providing them free online access to recreational and educational books. Pablo, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I will speak in Spanish and Lucia will help me because my English is bad English. Tiflonexos es la primera biblioteca digital para personas con discapacidad visual de habla hispana.
Tiflonexos is the first Spanish-speaking digital library for people with visual disabilities.
En 1999, un grupo de personas ciegas de Buenos Aires empezamos a explorar las oportunidades que nos daba el uso de la tecnología para acceder a la lectura y a la información.
In 1999, as a group of blind people from Buenos Aires, Argentina, we began to explore the opportunities offered by the use of technology in terms of access to reading and information.
Usar una computadora a través de un lector de pantallas, usar un escáner para convertir un libro... perdón, te dejo hasta ahí. Usar una computadora adaptándola con un software lector de pantalla.
To use a computer, adapting it with screen reader software.
A través de un escáner, convertir un texto impreso en un texto digital que podíamos leer con los lectores de pantalla.
Through a scanner to convert a printed text into a digital text so that it can be read through the screen reader.
Y usar Internet como medio para poner en común información y recursos.
And the use of Internet as a means to share information and resources.
La biblioteca surgió desde el principio como una red de encuentro e intercambio entre personas con discapacidad visual de todo el mundo.
The library was born as a network to meet and to exchange information for people with visual disabilities.
Poniendo en común los libros que cada persona digitalizaba para poder leerlos.
And just sharing the books that each one digitalized in order for everybody to read.
Y todo creció mucho más allá de lo que soñábamos cuando empezamos.
And everything grew far beyond what we expected and dreamed of.
Hoy Tiflonexos ofrece acceso gratuito a más de 63.000 libros en archivos digitales.
Today, Tiflonexos offers access to more than 63,000 books.
Para más de 10.000 usuarios con discapacidad visual y 500 instituciones que trabajan con personas con discapacidad visual y también con dislexia en todo el mundo.
To more than 10,000 users and 500 organizations that work with people with disabilities or dyslexia in 50 countries in 5 continents.
A partir de la experiencia de la biblioteca, hemos logrado cambiar el marco en cuanto a derechos de autor y libros para ciegos, el marco legal en la Argentina.
From the experience from our library, we were able to change the legal framework regarding copyright and books for the blind in Argentina.
Y hemos sido uno de los ejemplos tomados por la Unión Mundial de Ciegos para lograr un tratado internacional en Naciones Unidas, adoptado en 2013, sobre derechos de autor y libros para personas con discapacidad visual.
And we have been taken as an example by the World Union of the Blind for the negotiation in the United Nations of an international treaty that we were able to adopt in 2013, which modifies the legal framework at a global level to favor the production and exchange of accessible books between different countries.
Este intercambio de libros es fundamental en nuestro contexto de América Latina, porque junto con España somos 20 países que hablamos un mismo idioma y podemos compartir y aprovechar al máximo los recursos.
This exchange is fundamental in our context in Latin America, since together, along with Spain, we are 19 countries that speak the same language, and by building networks and thinking about access to reading at a global level, we are able to achieve a huge impact.
Construyendo redes y... No, perdón. Tiflonexos no es solo esta biblioteca, es también una construcción de encuentro, de intercambio entre personas con discapacidad de todo el mundo, que nos ha permitido generar una gran red en la que han ido surgiendo otras iniciativas y proyectos que siempre buscan la igualdad de oportunidades y la autonomía de las personas con discapacidad visual.
Tiflonexos is not just a library, it is built from shared resources and the experience of encounters with people, between people with disabilities from all over the world. It is a great network in which other initiatives and other projects have actually emerged. They tend to seek equal opportunities, autonomy, and change the social perspective on disability from welfare to inclusion.
Exacto. Hoy nuestros ejes principales de trabajo son la biblioteca, con acceso a libros tanto para recreación como para acceder en igualdad de condiciones a la educación.
Today, our main lines of work are the library, with access to books for recreation and for equal access to education.
El desarrollo de iniciativas que impulsen a los miembros de nuestra comunidad a aprovechar al máximo la tecnología para desarrollar su autonomía.
The development of initiatives that encourage the members of our community to make the most of technology and develop their autonomy.
Capacitaciones, espacios de intercambio sobre tecnología y discapacidad, e incluso viajes donde propiciamos el intercambio de experiencias y el que las personas se animen a hacer un poquito más de lo que creía que podían hacer.
This includes trainings, exchange spaces on technology and disability, trips where we promote encounters and exchange experiences, and basically for people to be encouraged to always believe that they can do a little bit more than they thought they could do.
Y brindamos apoyo y acompañamiento a empresas y organizaciones para lograr que la accesibilidad sea una dimensión presente en sus productos o servicios.
And we also support and walk through with companies and organizations for them to promote that accessibility is a dimension present in their products and services, and for them to incorporate the perspective of disability so that the digital world is increasingly accessible for people with visual disabilities.
Exacto, hasta ahí. Gracias.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Pablo. And next we go to Brett Matthews from Toronto. He's the founder of My Oral Village, which enables the oral population, or those who are illiterate or innumerate, to engage confidently in cashless financial transactions. Welcome, Brett. Sorry, Brett, I believe if you can unmute.
Hi, thanks, Todd. Sorry. When I was growing up, I was a white guy growing up in a middle-class household in Canada. And I was watching things on TV like the Civil War in Biafra and, you know, millions of starving children and the emergence of Bangladesh and the civil war between Pakistan and Bangladesh and the horrific human suffering. And I was wondering how to change things. And I was really, I wanted to be useful, but I just didn't know how. And eventually I met Dr. Muhammad Yunus. He is the founder of Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. And he really inspired me to think about banking and finance as a critical area. Shortly after I started my career in microfinance, which is really the delivery of financial services to poor people, I was in Northwest Bangladesh, and I was doing some work with an NGO there in the Northwest that had developed savings groups for the Shantali women. And Chantal is a very large language group in that area. They're an indigenous population. They're a minority in Bangladesh. And the NGO had organized these savings groups so that, say, about 20 women could meet every week, save a little bit of money together, and then eventually borrow it from each other and gradually do things like send their children to school for longer periods or build better housing or do a variety of other things. And the NGO had mandated that men could not join the group, that only women could join the group. And their purpose in mandating this was to empower women. And among the very first groups that I met, I sat and I listened to them. And as you can imagine, communication is a bit difficult because I had a translator who was translating from Bengali to Shantali and another that was Bengali to English. And we were listening, we were hearing them. I asked them for their financial statements, and there was a bit of confusion. And then after a while, the leader of the group just got up and left. She walked through the trees to the right of me, and I thought, oh no, I think I must have offended her by asking this question. And I didn't really know what was going on. And a few minutes later, I was beginning to think maybe it would be polite to just leave and thank them for their time. And she came back through this stand of trees to the right of me, and she was accompanied by a man, and the man was carrying a bunch of books under his arm. And they sat down and they showed me their financial records. And I learned something very profound from that. First of all, none of the women in this group could read or write in any language. They couldn't write numbers, they couldn't write words. They had to get a man to keep the records. And in fact, the reason this woman turned out to be the chair of the group was because her husband was willing to volunteer his time to do the records. But the other thing that was the consequence of this was that the social norms in the context were ensuring that women stayed poor regardless, because the power of men to define what people saved their money for, who borrowed it, how and why they borrowed it, had been reintroduced through this channel. And so I started really becoming puzzled. What can I do? I spent many years as a microfinance consultant, and I often made recommendations and suggestions and drew people's attention to these issues, but I could make no traction on this. So in 2010, I started an organization called My Oral Village. And the purpose of My Oral Village has really been to develop what we refer to as oral information management tools and designs. So we developed the science and practice of oral information management. The first part of oral information management is that we understand, we find out exactly what is making it impossible for an illiterate or a numerate adult to understand a passbook, or to understand a mobile money application, or to understand how to use any of these things, because there are specific problems. It's not just that they're sort of totally illiterate, which is something that people often say. It's that there's a specific problem that they have of some kind. So we had to identify what those problems were. It turned out that by far the largest of these problems is place value notation. There's probably a couple of 100 million adults, 15 years of age or older, around the world who cannot write a one-digit number. Most illiterate adults can do that, including most illiterate women. If I give them a pen and a piece of paper and ask them to write the number of their children, they can do it. What they can't do is read or write a 3-digit number, or a 4-digit number, or a 5-digit number. Place value notation. How many zeros are in the number? Where are those zeros located? It turns out this is a huge problem. 1 billion adults cannot decode a 3 or 4 or 5-digit number. And one of the problems with this is that almost everywhere you go in the developing world, it's almost as if the higher the population of illiterate adults, the lower the value of the currency relative to the US dollar. So you end up in a situation where, you know, routinely you have to do a 5-digit number in order to buy a pack of salt in a store, or a 5-digit number for a microfinance loan, or for a savings account. So we have been developing, and in addition to that, of course, they cannot read. So if you have, for example, a credit union, it will deliver financial services to many illiterate adults. It will provide them with a passbook, which tells them all about what their savings are and what their loans are. It'll record their transactions for them, but they cannot identify what cell in the passbook the transaction is being recorded in, because they cannot read any of the writing. And even if they do identify the cell, they can't decode the place value number. So we've been addressing these kind of questions with a number of solutions. And I'm going to just quickly share some examples. So what you're seeing here is what I refer to as oral iconography. And I'll try to make it bigger for you. Oral iconography has a number of characteristics. It needs to be locally recognizable and relevant, very easily remembered by an illiterate adult, and it needs to be attractive. So we integrate these oral iconography into passbooks. We integrate it into loan contracts. We integrate it into the entire range of both the paper-based and the digital aspects of formal finance. The examples you're seeing are from 3 different countries. Send and request money, or an example we developed in India. Starting and finishing dates of a loan contract or of a savings term deposit, one we developed for the Solomon Islands, and a savings group member, an example we developed for savings groups in Timor-Leste. And you'll see also here that there's a number of, there are 5 fundamental gaps that people face, illiterate adults face. Using 1-digit numbers, as I said, is a relatively minor gap, but we can address it using certain types of mnemonics. Using long numbers is a much bigger gap. And here we're doing things like developing something we refer to as a cash calculator, which is a piece of software that we're actually shortly going to put up on Google Play. You can see at the bottom of it a cash scroll bar, which allows the user to choose different cash notes and put them on a table. And then on the upper right-hand corner of the table, they'll see the correct number written. They won't necessarily pay any attention to the correct number. They can calculate just using the cash and the cash images and counting using those kind of images. So our intention here is to create a full interface that illiterate and illiterate adults can safely and independently use. And we have done a number of tests in this area, and we're actually doing a very large test right now in northern Kenya. We've just finished off a design in Sierra Leone for a credit union system over there. And our purpose really is to allow illiterate and illiterate adults to be able to safely enter the formal financial system whenever they wish, use it for whatever purposes they wish to use it for, and then leave it whenever they're ready to do so. So that's the goal of our organization.
Thanks very much, Brett. And again, Pablo and Jenny, thanks for your efforts as well. And we invite all of you again to, if you have any questions for the panelists, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat and we will share them. And just to get started, it seems that narrowing the participation gap infers that wider society will be more accepting and more inclusive of marginalized communities, such as those with whom you work. But each of your solutions seems to primarily empower these communities to build a sense of agency amongst themselves, rather than, say, advocacy for the wider community to accept them or to include them more. Is that an accurate estimation of your work? And if so, has that been a deliberate choice? And maybe Jenny, can we start with you?
Yeah, thank you, Todd. It's a really interesting question. I think, yes, it has been part of our strategy or choice, so to speak, to do it in a way. I wouldn't say that we not work for wider acceptance or acknowledgement around disability and inclusion, but I think that it's really important to create change. It must somehow also start from within. We must come together and we must focus on not just seeing the problems, but also the solutions. And I think to bring hope to our community, to talk about the future we want to have, and also to connect, to feel that we are not lonely and isolated, but that we are together. I think it's really important to build strength. So it's been partly part of our strategy, I think, to work a lot with the community, to communicate with the community first, so that the community itself becomes like the spokesperson for the change we want to see. That's how we work with it. And also that we want to become a speaking partner to businesses or agencies working with change in society or healthcare, or so that they can come to our community to ask questions or to get ideas for innovations or so. I think then it's important that we have some sort of community in the first place also. So yes, it's been part of the strategy, and that's how we work, but it's not that we don't want to see the other change. Of course we want to do exactly that, but it's important, I think, to start working from within also. Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny. And to Pablo, again, it seems the primary motivation is to empower the visually impaired. Is that a deliberate choice rather than, say, maybe advocacy for more inclusion by the wider community?
Perdón, Lucía, si me puedes aclarar la pregunta entendí una parte.
I'll just translate for Pablo. Si empoderar la comunidad de aquellos que tienen una discapacidad visual es un objetivo primordial, más allá de, digamos, una dirección hacia la comunidad en general. En tu caso, creo que podés hablar de la transversalidad de las políticas públicas.
Sí, sí. Si bien nuestro centro de trabajo es la comunidad de personas con discapacidad visual,
Even though our main focus of work is the community of people with visual disabilities,
uno de nuestros principales objetivos es que esta comunidad de personas con discapacidad visual sea visibilizada por el resto de la sociedad.
one of our main objectives is for this community of the visually impaired to be visibilized by the rest of society.
Muchas veces las barreras con las que nos encontramos en la sociedad en general y en el mundo digital también tienen que ver con un gran desconocimiento por parte de la sociedad de la diversidad de personas que participan en la comunidad y desconocimiento y prejuicios alrededor de la discapacidad visual en particular.
Many times the obstacles and barriers we face regarding this issue have to do with the lack of knowledge from people or from society regarding the community of people with visual disabilities.
Por eso nuestro trabajo va siempre en dos líneas paralelas que son necesarias para lograr los cambios.
That's why our work usually goes through two parallel lines of work in order to promote change.
Por un lado, empoderar a las personas con discapacidad visual, darles herramientas, darles formación y darle los recursos accesibles que necesitan para participar en igualdad de condiciones.
On one hand, empowering people with visual disabilities, providing them with tools, with technologies, people who have low access to technology, in order for them to participate in society in equal terms and for them to carry out activities in daily life in a safe way.
Y por otro lado, cambiar la mirada de la sociedad para que la discapacidad, la accesibilidad sean una dimensión transversal para que las políticas públicas, los servicios digitales, las bibliotecas, los distintos espacios de la comunidad incluyan la perspectiva de la discapacidad y la accesibilidad, visibilicen a estas personas.
And on the other hand, to include this perspective of disability into society, into public policy, in order for them to include people with disabilities so that they can access many of the resources that allows them to equally participate in everyday life and in everyday activities in a safe way.
Por eso siempre buscamos desarrollar alianzas y estrategias más allá de las personas con discapacidad y llevar adelante estas dos líneas en conjunto, porque ni vamos a lograr resultados solo empoderando a las personas con discapacidad, ni solo eliminando las barreras en el resto de la comunidad.
That's why we also try to make the effort to develop new partnerships that allow us to reach people with visual disabilities who are not yet connected, and to ensure also the improvement of the accessibility of the digital environment for people.
Okay. Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pablo and Lucia. And Brett, just want to give you the chance to jump in if you'd like to comment before we go to a few questions from our viewers.
I think our only real, our situation is a little different, but also a bit similar. I mean, our inherent goal is financial inclusion for everyone on the planet, independent, meaningful financial inclusion. So inevitably that has us dealing with a lot of financial institutions and financial service providers of one sort or another. But our instinct and our orientation is always to understand things at the community level first. If we don't understand them at the community level, then we have nothing to say to anybody else. So so we need to understand what is working and what is not working, and why it's working and why it isn't working, and then we need to advocate quite actively, I would say, to financial service providers, also to governments, to others around those issues. One of the key issues for us has been that within the microfinance community, people have simply said, well, everyone is numerate. And we have had to actually do empirical testing to prove that although they can read and write one-digit numbers, that is not the same as being able to read and write the numbers that microfinance institutions are constantly delivering, which are 4 and 5 and 6-digit numbers. So we have actually had to engage in active advocacy to demonstrate this point, and it's not one that's well known. So the two do work hand in hand.
Thank you. So in terms of both public policy and advocacy work, there is this effort to build more inclusion with the wider community. Thanks very much for that. And Jenny, we have a question. Building active communities is terribly complex. We at Ashoka have a lot to learn in this aspect. What are key learnings from building your community of families? And where is the most strategic place to put resources when building communities?
Wow, it's an interesting question. Thank you for that one. I think the most strategic, could you read that one again? The most strategic.
Sure thing. So first off, what are the key learnings from building your community of families, and what is the most strategic way to put resources when building communities?
Yeah. I can say when building a community within the field of area of disability and inclusion, I think for us what's been really good is not focusing so much on different groups, but rather the things we have in common. Because I think we have a bit of a history of a lot of division, and now also when we know that it gets more and more specific with different types of diagnosis due to science. We know more and more about the different types of diagnosis. It creates, and there must be also organizations working for specific diagnosis or raising awareness about exactly this one. But maybe you have then 5 families in one group and you have 100 in another, and it splits the kind of community. We also need to have forces bringing us together to raise our voice, because we know our voice is already pretty quiet sometimes, especially when we talk about people with intellectual disabilities. We need to come together, I think, really to raise our voice, and that's one of the key learnings we've learned in building the community is not to start by defining who is welcome in our community. We have said, well, if you have the need for, if you feel that you as a family have a need for reaching out and connecting, or to be there for others, to share your experiences, you are welcome. And that has been our starting point. And we haven't gone into so much about the different definitions. I think it's a bit of a mindset in this as well. This is why I like, maybe I come a bit off topic, but I think it's about the strategic, the question about the strategy here as well is where we focus about on universal design, as I said. I think it's a good umbrella in a way to have as a starting point to build something that's, it should be designed for all. Society must be for all. And then we can talk about perhaps different adaptations if needed. But the starting point must be that it's a wider umbrella. Then we start in the very specific adaptations, and then we just see the how we split up. So I think that's how we have worked with bringing families together, but also bringing services or businesses together. When we talk, we have the dialogue with them about how to engage in development processes, to start with the concept of building universal businesses or universal sites, for example. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Jenny. And it seems this finding what's in common and using that as a motivating factor to exercise change-making potential is very much aligns with Ashoka's basic common denominator, which is everyone has that change-making potential. And I'm wondering, Brett and Pablo, maybe Brett, we can start with you. When it comes to the communities that you work with, could you maybe share a little bit about how someone in the community that you work with would empower someone else, irrespective of, say, the intervention of your organization?
Well, thanks for that, Todd. So first of all, we tend to work with pre-existing communities that are already motivated at some level to achieve some kind of financial inclusion. So for example, all over the world, there are what they refer to as savings groups. They come in a variety of forms, but they typically have 15, 20 people in them. And they may, and these are people who are not usually able to access formal financial services. They live in rural areas, in villages, and they save with each other, they borrow from each other. And these groups are organized by NGOs. In India, self-help groups, which are a variety of savings groups, are organized by the government. And there are actually hundreds of millions of people. And very often they even form autonomously. So there are many that are just, they've been around since the 10th century. Actually, the first ones emerged in China in the 10th century and spread all over the world from there. So there's quite a lot of independent ones as well. So, so when you have that situation, there are always people in those groups who have more capabilities than other people. And so a lot of the critical issue is, how do you get them to share those capabilities? And how do you build designs which actually empower those who are a little bit further ahead to share with others? And so that's a lot of what we focus on doing, and trying to build on that level of capability.
Great. Thanks very much, Brett. And Pablo, I know you mentioned in your opening remarks how what TIFLO-Nexus does is much more than provide books for downloading for the visually impaired. You talked about it's a network that has grown organically. Can you share a little bit about how that network has thrived and how members of the network maybe empower one another?
Pablo,
Sí,
¿entendiste la pregunta?
Más o menos, si la podés traducir por las dudas.
Sí, como que mencionaste en tu inicio, como TIFLO-Nexus es mucho más que una biblioteca, sino que es una red. Entonces, ¿cómo funciona esa red? ¿Cómo ha ido, digamos, creciendo y cómo hace justamente que las personas como se sientan empoderadas, etcétera?
Por una parte, ya la construcción de la biblioteca siempre fue a través de puesta en común de recursos y de intercambio de información, inicialmente a través de grupos de correo electrónico.
On one hand, just building the library meant sharing resources and sharing experiences by different people. So that is a first way of saying that it is a network from the beginning.
Entonces, este intercambio, que al principio fue por mail, pero luego fue sumando otras herramientas como WhatsApp, como encuentros virtuales, esta red lo que permite es que muchas personas que tienen una discapacidad visual recién adquirida, que no conocen sus propias oportunidades, conectándose con otros, aprendan a usar herramientas y cambien su propia mirada sobre la discapacidad, sobre su propia discapacidad.
This network, which first initiated via email or sharing resources through WhatsApp, actually empowers people to look at themselves differently. Just look at, for them to be active players in society, not to view their disability as a disadvantage.
Otras actividades que han servido para potenciar esta red y generar vínculos entre las personas con discapacidad y así darle más fuerza a nuestro trabajo son viajes y encuentros de usuarios de la biblioteca que hemos organizado cada 2 años, donde combinamos el que la persona con discapacidad visual se anime a hacer una actividad turística, recreativa o de aventura, y a la vez se encuentre y comparta experiencias con otras personas en su misma situación.
Other ways that we empower and encourage people, besides the library, is through trips, but not touristic trips, but trips that actually promote autonomy for people and to actually rediscover their power and the fact that a visual disability doesn't have to be an obstacle for them to carry out a regular life.
Y otra dimensión importante de este trabajo de construir red, comunidad y empoderar es el trabajo que venimos desarrollando siempre en alianza con organizaciones locales, organizaciones de personas con discapacidad, escuelas, bibliotecas, para que los libros, la tecnología, la información llegue a las comunidades locales, a las personas que todavía no están conectadas, pero a través de estas organizaciones locales se empoderan también con los recursos y los contenidos de nuestra red.
And other ways that we promote this network is through the building of relationships with organizations and other organizations focused on disabilities, schools, and other institutions, so that these people can actually make the most of this network and of these resources and just continue to thrive in this society.
La clave es pensarnos siempre en red, siempre conectados con los demás y así aprovechando al máximo cada recurso, porque en América Latina siempre tenemos muchas más necesidades que recursos para atender esas necesidades, y es con la tecnología, y es con la red, y la puesta en común, y el trabajo articulado con otros que podemos generar mayores cambios.
A ver, vamos después con la segunda
Vamos.
parte.
Dale, empezá con la primera. Sí, te hice muy largo, perdón.
I'll break it down in two parts. And foremost, in Latin America, which we are terribly needed to work as a network, it is super important for us to build these relationships. A ver, repetime la última parte, por favor.
Porque siempre son más en América Latina son muchas más las necesidades que los recursos para atender esas necesidades, y por eso cuanto más articulemos y trabajemos todos hacia un mismo objetivo, cuanto más hagamos redes, más lejos va a llegar cada recurso y más impacto vamos a lograr.
So in Latin America, there's always more needs than resources. And the more we work as a network, the more impact that we're able to have and to actually build towards a common goal.
Y por último, al trabajar como una red de personas con discapacidad visual, podemos conocer de primera mano las necesidades y las distintas realidades en cada lugar.
And also working as a network allows us to know the realities of different places, different environments, and different people.
Y a partir de esas necesidades, impulsar políticas y cambios a nivel global que tengan en cuenta esas realidades y esas necesidades, y generar vínculos con otros espacios que tengan las mismas necesidades.
And through that knowledge of different environments and different societies and different people, we're able to promote public policy in order for those realities to actually get the change that they so drastically need.
Mm-hmm. Okay, gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo and Lucia. And we have time maybe for one more question before we go to our calls to action from our three panelists. And so I'll just open this up. Jenny, Pablo, and Brett, whichever one of you wishes to respond. Technology plays such a key part in all of your solutions. Do you think the strategic use of technology is central to creating certainty right now? Or are there also downsides to consider? Is it a little bit more complicated in light of your own experience and model?
Well, if I can just take that on first. I think that technology isn't going away. Technology is the way humans organize themselves in society, or it's a really integral part of the way we organize ourselves in society. And wherever we go, however we address climate change, however we address poverty, however we address development from nation to nation, technology is going to be an integral part of that. I think the great challenge is that very often we have allowed our technology to evolve alongside us, and we haven't realized that we have been evolving along with the technology. And there are certain entry points that are absolutely minimum prerequisites for participating in our society that technology creates. And we have been forgetting to pay attention to who we leave out when our technology evolves. And we have been forgetting to pay attention to the fact that when our technology evolves, we are actually sophisticated enough as a species to figure out how to not leave people out. And I think we can do a lot better with that. And I think that's really the sort of certainty I would want to see us evolve towards, a very conscious awareness of ourselves as a technological species and what the implications of that are for inclusion worldwide.
I'll just translate for Pablo if you think that's best. Pablo, esta pregunta tenía que ver con la tecnología. Tiene que ver un poco cómo la tecnología juega un papel fundamental en todas las soluciones y si pensás que hay un uso estratégico de la tecnología que sea esencial para generar certidumbre en este tiempo, o si también hay algunos aspectos también negativos para ser considerados.
Bueno, sí, para nosotros la tecnología siempre estuvo en el centro de nuestro trabajo, pues para quienes tenemos una discapacidad visual es la forma que nos ha permitido acceder de manera autónoma a información y a recursos que antes no podíamos acceder por nosotros mismos.
For us, technology has always been a center tool for our work because for those of us who have a visual disability, it is the one technology, this tool that allows us to access in an autonomous manner information and resources and also participate under equal conditions in different aspects of social life.
Hoy con la pandemia se aceleró la digitalización del mundo y esto para quienes dominamos la tecnología puede ser una ventaja. Pero tenemos dos problemas enormes que enfrentar. Vale.
Sorry, with the pandemic, this digitalization of the world, it has accelerated, and this actually can mean an advantage for those of us who master technology, but it also, we face two big challenges.
Por un lado, un porcentaje muy alto de las personas con discapacidad visual todavía no acceden a la tecnología y quienes acceden la manejan aún en muchos casos de forma muy limitada.
On one hand, there's a very large percentage of people with visual disabilities who still don't have access to technology, and those who do, also in a high percentage, have a very basic use.
Nosotros con 20 años de trabajo con gran impacto en la región, hoy apenas estamos alcanzando al 1% de las personas con discapacidad. Esto quiere decir que todavía existe una enorme cantidad de personas con discapacidad visual desconectadas y que desconocen sus propias oportunidades o que no pueden acceder a herramientas que les facilitarían la vida.
Even though we have 20 years of experience and trajectory on our work, we're only still able to reach just 1% of people with disabilities over the world. So there's still a huge amount of people that are still needing to access technology and to be able to use this tool for their social life and other means.
Y por otro lado, en esta acelerada digitalización del mundo, si no se contempla la perspectiva de la accesibilidad, si se desconoce que las personas con discapacidad visual podemos acceder al mundo digital y tener iguales oportunidades, se pueden crear nuevas barreras.
And also, if we don't consider the perspective of accessibility, and by not knowing that there's people with disabilities that can actually access the digital environment in an equal manner as everybody else in terms of opportunities, this actually creates more barriers.
Por eso, como decía antes, hoy es uno de los objetivos importantes y centrales visibilizar a las personas con discapacidad visual y incorporar en las políticas y en los desarrollos digitales la perspectiva de la accesibilidad y de la diversidad de usuarios.
That's why it's so crucial and such an important objective and goal for us, for Tiflo Nexus, to actually make our collective visible and to incorporate accessibility and inclusion as a dimension that has to be present in the digital world, in the making of public policies, and in the building of digital products as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo and Lucia. And we just have a few minutes left. And so, Jenny, I'd like to invite you maybe, if you could share your call to action or specific steps that the audience can take to narrow the participation gap and make change.
Yeah, so I wrote down a few things, but I know we only have a couple of minutes left, so I'll keep it a bit shorter. But I want to start by saying that I want to see a world where we keep questioning the concept of normal. That's what's happening now. We speak about the new normal, and all of a sudden normal is up for discussion, and we welcome this discussion for sure. Because what is normal anyway? Who is normal anyway? I want to see a world which sees and values that only with different ways to be, to think, to communicate, to function, to act, and to reflect can we bring groundbreaking ideas and perspectives to the table and create the innovations of tomorrow. Because I am convinced that the world is ready for non-stereotype ideas. Actually, the world desperately needs more non-stereotype ideas. So I want to encourage you all to raise your ambitions when it comes to inclusion, to welcome us, this panel today, to welcome our normal families or other networks and organizations covering disabilities and inclusion in your development work, in your development processes, strategy work, business development. If the Agenda 2030 is no one left behind, we must also start preparing for an agenda right after that. And this one certainly must be more progressive, covering not just that no one shouldn't be left behind, but that everyone has a place also in going forward. So that's how I would frame it. Thank you.
Wonderful, Jenny. Thanks very much. And Brett or Pablo, we have less than a minute. Would you like to give us your condensed call to action? Brett?
Very, very quickly, I would just ask people to imagine what it is like in this world, not in some hypothetical one, but in this real world we live in, to not be able to read a 3-digit number or write one. There are so many situations which are fundamental, where you just need it for survival, and if you don't have it, how can you be included? So we really need to change this. It's a profound disability in its own right, and it needs to be seen in that way.
Thank you, Brett. And Pablo?
Pablo, un call to action.
Ahí está, perdón. ¿Cuál era la pregunta?
Un call to action para dejarle a la gente.
Ok. Digamos, lo que yo pienso es que tenemos que seguir tejiendo redes y alianzas.
We still need to build network and partnerships.
No invisibilicemos a las personas con discapacidad.
And let's visibilize people with disabilities.
Pensemos siempre en cualquier ámbito que trabajemos, que los usuarios, los clientes, los que están del otro lado son diversos y no son una persona ideal.
Let's always think, and no matter what field we work in, that our audience, it's not an ideal person. They're diverse.
Impulsemos la inclusión de la perspectiva de la discapacidad en todos los ámbitos.
And let's promote the inclusion of the disability perspective in all areas.
Especialmente impulsemos que la discapacidad y la accesibilidad sean elementos transversales y presentes en las políticas públicas.
And let's especially promote the inclusion of the accessibility perspective for it to be transversal in all public policies.
Y que estas políticas se las genere no desde la perspectiva del asistencialismo, de la asistencia, sino desde el garantizar la igualdad de oportunidades.
And also for these public policies to be not from welfare, but from seeking inclusion and equal opportunities.
Hoy la tecnología disponible, más el trabajo en red, nos da enormes oportunidades.
Today, networking and technology gives us huge opportunities.
Nuestro trabajo demuestra que se puede lograr un gran impacto.
And our work actually shows that great impact can be achieved.
Pero para multiplicar los alcances y alcanzar a tantas personas que todavía están invisibles y desconocen sus propias oportunidades, es necesario ampliar nuestro trabajo y construir un mundo más accesible que incluya siempre a la diversidad de sus habitantes.
But in order to reach all our audiences and all people with disabilities, we need to enhance our work and incorporate the perspective of disability in all spaces that includes the diversity of everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. And Jenny, Pablo, Brett, thank you all for taking time today to share your solutions to the participation gap and for discussing how you're adapting your work to rediscover certainty in challenging times. We're grateful for the model your change-making provides. And to everyone else who has joined us, thanks kindly for your time. Thanks too for helping to build an everyone a changemaker world. All the best.